Tracking some breaking news out of Vancouver. A bail hearing is underway at the BC Supreme Court over the extradition of Huawei's chief financial officer. We're learning more about the circumstances of MENG Wanzhou's arrest and why the U.S. wants to extradite her. Laura McQUILLAN has been following the story. She joins me now. So, Laura, what are we hearing this hour?
Andrew, this bail hearing has now been ongoing for more than 2 hours. It's currently on its lunch break, but the details that we do have so far are new information coming up from the lawyers because, of course, there was a publication ban that was lifted earlier today, and finally we're finding out about these charges that she is expected to face in the US. So MENG Wanzhou is wanted in the US on charges of conspiracy to defraud multiple international institutions. We're hearing each charge would have a maximum sentence of up to 30 years in prison. And we found out today more about what has motivated these charges. Just to note, this is a court sketch of MENG Wanzhou sitting there in the defendant's spot with an interpreter next to her in court today. So it's alleged that she personally misled US banks about the relationship between Huawei, where she is the chief financial officer, and another company called Skycom, which was doing business with Iran, allegedly in breach of those US sanctions against Iran. Now, we don't know all the details of exactly what unfolded, but it is alleged that MENG personally assured US banks that the two companies were quite separate, and that is the alleged fraud in this instance. Now, we know that she did serve on the board of Skycom, that second company, for about a year between 2008 and 2009. That's something that came up in court today. But MENG's lawyer did say that she is going to fight these allegations against her, although at this point in time they say they only have skeletal details of exactly what it is that is alleged. Now, a few other details of what each side's lawyers have said. Her lawyer is appealing for bail at this bail hearing today, saying she is not a flight risk. As for why, well, he said she will not breach bail because that would embarrass her father, who is the founder of Huawei, also the company itself, and China, because she is such a prominent figure in China. So offering that assurance, suggesting that if they are worried she's a flight risk, that perhaps some surveillance or private security could be an option to ensure that she can be monitored while she's out on bail. We heard from a lawyer for the Attorney General of Canada as well. They are saying that they believe MENG is a flight risk. She has only loose ties to Canada, does own 2 properties in Vancouver, but only spends a few weeks in Vancouver over the summertime. Also access to vast resources. Her father, a billionaire worth $3.2 billion. So there is some concern from the Crown's side there. We're waiting to see what happens in that court hearing. As I mentioned, it has been past 2 hours now. We're not exactly sure when we might hear back from the judge on a decision on her bail.
So what happens if she wants to fight the extradition?
Well, that's the obvious next step once we get this bail matter out of the way, but it could take years, which we have seen in past cases, you know, dragging past potentially a decade, and it depends on the case, it depends on what her defence against that is. It could be that MENG's lawyers might try to suggest to judges here in Canada that the charges are more politically motivated than actually based on criminality, because of course China involved in this trade dispute with the US. Huawei has been accused of stealing US intellectual property for its business. So we're watching all of that. We're also watching what the impact might be on China's relationship with Canada. We heard from the Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, earlier today, saying that the Canadian ambassador to China has been giving reassurances to China about the process involved here. So for now, extradition some way off, but the bail hearing, where all eyes are now, we'll be keeping a close eye on that one for you, Andrew.
All right, Laura, thank you.
You're welcome.
There was some good news today.